Why were there two trees in the Garden of Eden? God intentionally placed two trees in the Garden of Eden because he valued Adam and Eve's free will. As his precious created beings, who were made distinctly in his own image, Adam and Eve possessed the ability to choose. For context, let's take a look at the story behind these trees and the fall of mankind. In Genesis chapter 2, verses 8 through 9, after God had created Adam, but not Eve yet, the two trees are specifically mentioned. The Lord God planted a garden toward the east, in Eden, and there he placed the man whom he had formed. Out of the ground the Lord God caused every tree to grow that is pleasing to the sight and good for food. The tree of life was also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. In Genesis chapter 2, verses 15 through 17, God places Adam in the Garden of Eden to cultivate and tend it. God then gives this command: "From any tree of the garden you may freely eat, but from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for on the day that you eat from it you will certainly die." After Eve is created and the couple is living in Eden together, Satan, in the form of a serpent, tempts Eve to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, as described in Genesis chapter 3, verses 1 through 5. Unfortunately, Eve gives in to temptation and eats the forbidden fruit, giving it to Adam, who also eats it, as noted in Genesis chapter 3, verse 6. Adam and Eve's eyes are opened so that they know that they are naked. Ashamed, they sew fig leaves together and make themselves coverings, as described in Genesis chapter 3, verse 7. God then holds Adam and Eve to account for the decision they had made to eat of the forbidden tree, as noted in Genesis chapter 3, verses 9 through 13. As part of their punishment, Adam and Eve are expelled from the garden to prevent humanity from accessing the tree of life and living in their sin forever. God stationed cherubim and a flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard the way to the tree of life, as detailed in Genesis chapter 3, verse 24. Some may say that God is not loving because he placed the two trees in the garden. He allowed Adam and Eve to have access to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, knowing that if the fruit were eaten, sin and death would enter the world. There are a couple points that should be considered. First, God did not force or trick Adam and Eve into eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. In fact, he specifically commanded Adam to not eat of the tree, making it clear that it would result in certain death. Adam chose to break God's commandment, and as a result faced the consequences of his sin, along with the rest of humanity. Romans 5:12-14. Second, God's love is benevolent, agape love, and therefore does not force human beings into subjection as a tyrant would. Because we are created in his image, set apart from the rest of creation, he gives us free will. In order for Adam and Eve to truly be free, they had to have a choice. Therefore, two trees were necessary. Unfortunately, Adam and Eve chose of their own free will to disobey God and eat the forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. In conclusion, God gave Adam and Eve a choice in the Garden of Eden to obey or disobey God's command. He planted two trees to choose from. He gave them this choice because he designed them to have free will, reflecting his own, and because he valued their freedom and loved them enough to not force them into subjection. They were free moral agents, not programmed robots. Still today there are choices set before us. Whoever believes in him is not condemned, but whoever does not believe stands condemned already, because they have not believed in the name of God's one and only Son. John 3:18. We must choose wisely. In more detail, we will talk about the tree of life in our next video. Please join us to dive deeper into the biblical stories which we thought we knew all about.